this is my review of Death Note. Okay, so starting with this episode, the Kira Task Force starts investigating the Yotsuba Group now that they have proper surveillance in place to actually keep an eye on all of them. And effectively they monitor the meeting and immediately realize that they most likely killed one of their members. And they did. They killed a man named Hattori who was the guy who spoke up last time about his opposition to the killings and how he didn't want to be in the meetings anymore, and they killed him. And they confess as such in the meetings rather coldly. So, and naturally everybody is shocked by this, about how coldly they're acting about it, and it just gets worse and worse. So immediately after discussing Hattori's death without so much as a hint of emotion, they also begins discussing their payment of Coil and how he hasn't really done anything to investigate the identity of L, which isn't surprising since it's Iber pretending to pose as Coil, who is actually an alias of L. So, yeah, of course the investigation hasn't turned up anything. He's a fake detective. They really can't pull up any evidence on L, since L is using it as an alias to protect himself. However, they do note that Coil had indeed noticed the trend of everybody dying on the weekends, and they also propose that they should probably stagger the killings a little bit since it's a bit noticeable. And Coil even realized that Coil pointed out that if he noticed, then L most likely has noticed as well. But then of course they move on to who they actually want to kill. And start listing off names for a bunch of different companies that could very much rival them in the market. At which point everybody decides that they need to intervene, but L stops them, mainly because, ironically enough, the people need to die for them to have actual concrete proof that the Yotsuba Group, that somebody in the room, is indeed Kira. And the problem with that is that not everybody's happy with that solution, because, ironically enough, the only way they can actually get proof is if somebody dies when they're actually discussed in the meeting. So ironically, the people have to die before they can actually get the evidence they need, when they already have Matsuru's testimony and the video footage of everybody discussing everything. And so Ichiro even volunteers to call up one of the men and get them to stop the killings, but of course that's going to cause everybody to panic, and Light offers an alternative solution. He calls up the one who's least likely to be Kira, but most likely to have the most power of anybody in the room, Reimi Kamikawa, and he calls up Reimi pretending to be L, and basically blackmails him into being a mole for the Yotsuba Group. He effectively uses Reimi's influence to control the Yotsuba Group members and get them to fall in line with L's ideals, which is basically he's been blackmailed so that if they do exactly as he says, and also don't bring up the call, and also he doesn't bring up the call to anybody else, that everybody except for Kira, whoever it is, will be acquitted. So effectively if they turn on Kira and turn him in, then everybody else will be acquitted, and they'll be able to go on with their merry lives, regardless of which side goes on. And Kamikawa agrees, and then gets the killings delayed a month, pointing out that it should be more than enough time for Coil to actually get information on L. And then for every month afterward, they'll continue to do killings until L is eventually captured and killed. And at which point they'll proceed with the regular weekly killings, because L will be gone by that point. So why should they care? And everybody agrees and ends the meeting. And after the meeting ends, L is impressed by Light and points out that he was able to come to solutions a lot faster than L normally would be, and offers Light the mantle of L should the real deal actually pass on and die during the course of the investigation. And while Light is initially a little shocked by that, he does eventually realize what L is thinking and points it out loud to everybody in the room. L's not been doing this out of charity because he thinks that L would succeed, that Light is worthy of succeeding him. L is doing this to test to see which of his theories is correct. And basically L has two theories. Either A, Light is pretending not to be Kira and is just waiting for L to let his guard down so that he can kill him. And if he had said yes, that would have concluded that theory. But since Light says no and turns down the offer, that would also confirm theory 2, which is that Light is pretending. Light really did lose his memories, passed his power on to somebody else, and is waiting until he's completely acquitted to be able to actually become Kira again. And we know, and we as the audience know that the second one is actually true, since we actually saw it happen. But Light post Death Note doesn't know this, and neither does L. So neither of them can actually confirm or deny this. But Light points out that it is indeed the ideal situation. As L, Kira would be able to basically kill whoever he wants and manipulate the task force to do whatever he wants, and he can basically keep the task force away from him so that he can just kill unopposed and nobody would ever be able to catch him. And that is actually a brilliant advantage thing, because L is one of the most influential in-universe detective. So if Kira did have the mantle of L as well, that it would mean that nobody would ever be able to catch him, which would be problematic. So, and even Light points out that it is definitely advantageous, but then turns down the mantle, as I said, pointing out that it should prove that he's not Kira. But L points out otherwise, stating that he literally just told his plan to everybody else. And indeed that is his plan. Light isn't entirely aware that that's his plan, but it is indeed his plan. So at which point Light grabs L's chair and makes him look him in the eyes and asks him if Light is truly capable of being a murderer. And L points out that he's always seen Light that way. And the two start to come to blows again, but Matsura steps in and stops it. But in any case, Soichiro immediately after this brings up the idea of arresting all 7 of the men again, pointing out that they have enough evidence. But L points out again that that's also a bit risky, since they have no concrete proof that any of the men in that room are actually L. Well, they're not actually Kira, so they don't have any proof. And they're just bringing in on the charges that they're complicit, but which L is openly against, pointing out that if they wind up being wrong and none of the men are actually Kira, then Kira will just pass his power on again and continue killing, and the victims will increase. So it's not exactly ideal. They don't have enough evidence to actually convict any of them as being Kira, so it's entirely impossible to actually narrow it down until they get more information. And upon realizing that the task force and himself have different ideas of how to go about things, L decides that it's best if he works alone on his own in separate investigation while everybody else works on theirs. At which point he decides to go up to Misa's room with Light in tow, of course, since they have the big ass shackle on both of their arms. And Light kind of has no choice but to go along with him. And they go to Misa's apartment and on the upper floors, and L asks Misa who she would choose between Light and Kira. And obviously Misa chooses Light, since while she does admire Kira for what he did for her, she is firmly in love with Light and will follow him to the ends of the earth and will protect him and help him however she can. At which point at Light's prodding, L decides to reveal his plan. That's using the information they've already gathered about how Misa was the second Kira, that they would actually be able to use that information to basically get the Yotsuba Group interested in her even more. Thanks to Matsura's thing that he did last episode, but they can use that information to indeed endear her to the Yotsuba Group, because she had been picked up by L, And the Yotsuba Group is very interested to know who L is, so naturally they would take a big interest to her. But it would also serve as a double-edged sword, since while they're trying to figure out who L is through her, she's going to be figuring out who the third Kira is by basically just being around them and investigating them in private. And Misa is happy about this, but Light is firmly against it since he thinks it's a little too dangerous and feels that L is playing a little bit dirty to actually use Misa against him, since L kind of made it so that Light either has to choose to work with Misa or his father, but L points out that that's not necessarily the case, since he knows that Misa is in love with Light and will most likely work with him anyway, regardless. At which point Misa realizes that she misjudged L and even gives him a kiss on the cheek, and the two become friends after that. So Misa is happy to be able to work with yet another friend and protect and keep him safe, since she doesn't let her friends down, and she points out that she's willing to work with the investigation regardless of how the outcome it actually turns out. Although Light still has several protests in regards to using Misa this way. And also, the final shot of the episode is of Soichiro and the rest of the task force trying to figure out the logistics behind how to arrest 7 guys at the same time. That's all right. So yeah, it establishes that Light basically cut them loose to go do their own thing, but they're quickly finding out that L might have been right, since as he kind of pointed out, it's just a little bit difficult to arrest several people at the same time, and they're definitely going to struggle with that, especially since there's only like 3 or 4 of them. So yeah, it's gonna be a bit risky for them to actually investigate the Yotsuba Group and try to figure out which one is Kira. But they have narrowed it down to 7, since one of them's dead, which confirms that he's not Kira, so they have at least 7 more chances. But they are going to start narrowing down which of the 7 remaining men is Kira. And they have a mole on the inside now in the form of Kamikawa, so it's definitely seeming likely that they're eventually going to be able to catch Kira and figure out who he is, because all they need to do is narrow it down to whichever one is actually Kira. So they just need to narrow it down and go from there. But yeah, in any case, that's my review of Death Note. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter in the description below. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm always saying thanks. So be sure to check this out in the description below as well. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!